Hello everyone, and welcome to the Tome of Silver, the show where I randomly select a game from my collection, review it, and add it to an ever-growing ranking list. During Bethesda's presentation at E3 2019, players would get a new look at developer Tango Dreamworks' latest title for the PlayStation 5, Ghostwire Tokyo. This new title for next-generation systems was introduced by legendary game director Shinji Mikami, alongside the creative director who would quickly steal the internet's hearts with her sheer charisma, Ikumi Nakamura. Shinji Mikami is often cited as the godfather of survival horror, having worked as either director or producer on all the original Resident Evil titles, and directing the Evil Within games. As such, many expected Ghostwire Tokyo to fall within the same wheelhouse. While its first few cinematic trailers showed off plenty of creepy and haunting imagery, Ghostwire Tokyo wasn't a horror game at all. In fact, Ghostwire isn't scary in the slightest. It's an action-adventure game, just with supernatural elements. This was a surprise and disappointment to some, myself included, as the imagery shown in the game's promotional material was genuinely spooky, and it looked like it could have made a phenomenal horror title. At the same time though, this blend of the paranormal with an open-world Tokyo and combat based on ritualistic hand signs looked like nothing we'd ever seen before. So while it may not have been the horror title some had anticipated, it had all the makings of a unique, spine-chilling adventure. So instead of getting hung up on what Ghostwire could have been, let's look at it for what it is. Offer a prayer, exercise some spirits, and let's turn to Ghostwire Tokyo for the PlayStation 5. Late one night in Tokyo, young Akito Izuki is speeding through the city streets on his motorcycle, rushing to visit his comatose sister, Mari, at the local hospital. On his way, Akito is struck by an oncoming vehicle and rendered unconscious. A spirit by the name of KK flies through the collision, desperate to find a body to possess before he fades away. Believing Akito to be dead, KK tries to possess his body, but Akito manages to maintain control. At the same time, a man in a demonic mask appears on the Tokyo digital screens, as a bizarre fog rolls into the city. The fog rapture bombs anyone it touches, turning them into a spirit, with Akito miraculously being spared thanks to being possessed by KK. The masked man summons forth from the fog malicious entities known as visitors, while sealing the people of Tokyo away into floating cages. KK tells Akito that he needs to stop the masked man, but Akito is determined to ensure his sister's safety first. Upon reaching the hospital, Akito watches as the masked man and his subordinates, known as the Faceless, kidnap Mari to use her as a vessel for some unknown ritual. The two now sharing a common enemy, Akito and KK reluctantly decide to work together to stop the Faceless' plans and rescue Mari. I was pretty let down by Ghostwire's story. The main goal of stopping the man in the Hanya mask is serviceable, but nothing about the villain's goals was all that captivating, and everything that follows fails to live up to the game's interesting setup. Akito was a bland protagonist, having very little going on in terms of backstory and personality. He had a bit of a sarcastic wit, which made for some fun banter with his spirit companion KK, but the extent of his character begins and ends with wanting to protect his sister, Mari. We hardly get to know Mari, as she's in a coma when the story starts, with only the odd flashback here or there to show us what the siblings' relationship was. However, they weren't enough to make me care about saving Mari, which means I didn't care about the core aspect of our protagonist. KK fares a little better, having a history as part of a team of paranormal investigators. Learning about KK and his team's previous operations and the events leading to KK's transformation into a spirit was a little interesting. The most substantial element of Ghostwire's narrative is the building relationship between Akito and KK. The two have plenty of strong banter, especially in the early parts of the story, when they constantly exchange barbed comments. Akito and KK are very different people, with Akito still being an optimistic young boy, while KK is an older, pragmatic ex-cop, and their clashing personalities bounce off each other very well. It was nice slowly seeing the pair begin to rely on and bond with each other, eventually even starting to see one another as partners. It was sweet, as long as you forget that KK's first instinct when possessing Akito was to try and kill him. On the whole, Ghostwire Tokyo's story is fine, but hardly one that I'll care to remember. It lacked anything genuinely unique, and some fun conversations aren't enough to save what are some pretty dull characters. Ghostwire Tokyo's visuals are breathtaking. The neon lights of Tokyo's many buildings and digital signs illuminated against the backdrop of night and piercing through the fog are striking. The number of details and effects on display for an open world is staggering, all with minimal loading screens when entering and exiting buildings, and only the odd bit of pop-in here and there. It's not just raw graphical fidelity Ghostwire excels in, but also its brilliant art direction. Various segments have the environment twist and shift, creating mind-blowing moments where it feels like reality is breaking apart. Oh, and a bunch of these little supernatural elements are added when encountering visitors, like how the streetlights change from yellow to a dangerous red as visitors gradually become more aware of your presence. I think my absolute favorite is the effect when the headless students are nearby. As you approach, light from an unknown source shines against a wall, depicting the shadows of running children who aren't there. It's so creepy. Ghostwire set the bar for what next-gen systems were capable of. It crafts an open world I'm dying to explore and see more of. It's for that reason that it's so disappointing that said open world is actually pretty boring. Thanks to our friend in the mask, every other living person in Tokyo has been transformed into a spirit, leaving the city streets empty and lifeless, save for the odd dog and cat that can be found hanging around. And while you can walk up and down the barren streets until the heat death of the universe, there are scarce few buildings you can actually enter. Most buildings are either sealed shut or blocked off with the horrifying supernatural creature known as the Metal Chain, with only the odd apartment building or hospital being enterable during the story. I never felt rewarded for exploring Tokyo. Oh sure, there's a bajillion mini-tasks and collectibles littering your map like any other open-world game, and we'll get to all those later. But the best prize of a vast traversable environment, the feeling of exploration, just isn't there. All I'm going to see is more buildings, abandoned clothes, and maybe a tree if I'm lucky. Oh, is that a cherry blossom tree? That's kinda nice, actually. The main things you'll encounter are the various visitors, whose designs were influenced by urban legends and yokai from Japan, which is incredibly cool. You may look at this distinguished gentleman in a tie and say, wait, is that Slenderman? To which I'd say, no, idiot! They're based on the many ghost stories surrounding overworked businessmen in Japanese society. All the visitors are very well designed, and they excited me to see what I might encounter next. More importantly, it gave Ghostwire good enemy variety, though it did feel like they used the businessmen and student visitors far too much compared to the others. To deal with these visitors, we'll have to rely on combat, the main meat of Ghostwire's gameplay. Though it's labeled as an action-adventure game, it almost feels fairer to call it a first-person shooter. Akito can palm strike enemies that get too close, but it's more of a way to push visitors away than a primary method of attack. Instead, your main way of fighting paranormal entities comes from Akito's weaving abilities. At first, Akito starts only with wind weaving, which fires single, fast shots from his fingertips. But eventually, he'll also obtain water and fire weavings, which fires a projectile that covers a wide area and an explosive respectively. Once the spirit has taken enough damage, it'll momentarily be stunned and expose its core, allowing Akito to grab and destroy it with a pretty badass animation.
I absolve you of your sins. You have been forgiven.
Doing this will instantly defeat the enemy, while giving back some uses of your weaving abilities. But it takes a moment to perform, and leaves you exposed to enemy attacks. Akito also has a handy block for when enemies move too fast to dodge, but the shield has a limit, discouraging overuse. I enjoyed Ghostwire's combat for what it was. Though I compared it to a first-person shooter, I appreciated that none of the weaving techniques felt like I was using a firearm from any other video game with a different coat of paint. As you level up and upgrade your abilities, I enjoyed how fast the combat can get, especially near the endgame. Expertly breaking cores while avoiding the waves of increasingly vicious spirits and blocking attacks at the last moment got pretty exciting. It's a solid combat system that I found satisfying. The problem is how quickly it becomes repetitive. Ghostwire has a lot of combat, but with only 3 varieties of weaving, you'll be dealing with the enemies consistently in the same way. You also have much fewer uses for water and fire weavings. For every 6 charges of wind, you'll have roughly 2 charges for water and 1 for fire. As such, you'll be using wind far more often, further limiting combat variety and making things quickly become stale. This isn't too big of a problem if you're focusing primarily on the 9-hour or so main campaign with the occasional side activity. If you're aiming for 100%, however, that will take close to 40 hours, and the combat simply doesn't do enough interesting to remain engaging for even half that length. As an open world game, Ghostwire Tokyo unfortunately has all the modern trappings that the genre brings. It floods your map with hundreds of collectibles to find, most of which just serve as unnecessary busy work to fully upgrade your abilities, while not offering anything new or exciting. Finding tanuki, spirits, and shrines are the many activities that require the player to walk around the map and search every nook and cranny. If you're not searching for collectibles, you'll instead have tasks like cleansing gates or cherry blossom trees, which boil down to fighting more waves of enemies. The most interesting of the optional activities come from the side missions, but even these are a mixed bag.
Whoever told you to do this, well, she's either a bitch or a ghost. Run! She's a ghost and a bitch!
Some I found to be fun distractions that tap into aspects of Japanese folklore. One mission had a spirit mention that he was unable to pass on due to a lingering curiosity, as he seen the head of a woman poking from around corners, only to disappear whenever he approached. We search around for a bit, and see the head peeking out. After following it for a while, we discover that the woman is a Rokuro Kubi, a yokai resembling a human with elongated necks, making them look almost snake-like. Even though the side mission was only a short chase between some buildings, it allowed me to learn about a yokai I'd never heard of before. So even though it was mechanically basic, I was fully engaged nevertheless. Then there are others that are so dull or pointless that I struggle to imagine why the team even bothered making them a mission at all. For example, one mission has our protagonist find a spirit who cannot move on because they ran out of toilet paper. Riveting stuff. All you need to do to complete the mission is find 2 rolls of toilet paper, which are just a handful of steps from the door. There's no combat, exploration, or anything. Just fetching toilet paper. This is the worst it gets, but every mission that has an interesting premise, like dealing with a yokai or a curse, there's another that just boils down to either fetching an item for an NPC, or going to an area and fighting hordes of enemies for a bit. I would have much preferred it if the number of side missions was cut in half, but with greater focus on quality. As it is, I just didn't care to complete every side mission, because I wasn't sure if it was going to be something compelling, or just more busy work to add to the others. To Ghostwire's credit, they do provide a healthy amount of rewards for completing all the side content. Outside of additional experience and items you can equip for an advantage in combat, players can also find music tracks from specific missions to listen to the game's chilling soundtrack. These tracks are definitely worth listening to, as they hit the delicate balance between being atmospheric while still having a melody, a combination I've always been a sucker for. You can also unlock a bunch of outfits and accessories for Akito, if you'd prefer something other than his default outfit. There's a decent variety to collect, but I do have to question the choice to put so much time into making all these cosmetics. Ghostwire is a first-person game. Besides Akito's forearms and hands, you rarely get to see these outfits outside of story cutscenes. For how little of the cosmetics you get to appreciate, it doesn't feel like these were worthwhile inclusions, and time could have been better spent elsewhere. Finally, Ghostwire Tokyo received a free DLC post-launch, called The Spider's Thread. This is a roguelite mode, in which players must ascend randomized floors of escalating difficulty. Should the player die, they'll lose any money and items they found, while maintaining any skills they obtained, with the ultimate goal being to reach the final floor. This is a really cool bonus mode, and it's made all the better because it doesn't cost a cent. I really appreciate how much effort the developers put into the free content, especially during an age where corporate greed and outrageous amounts of paid DLC run rampant. Spider's Thread adds another 10 hours of playtime, providing more bang for the player's buck. Great stuff. When I think about Ghostwire as a whole, the thing my mind always comes back to is just how impressive the visuals look. It's still one of the most impressive looking games I have played, and it's truly amazing what Tango Dreamworks have created here. But if Ghostwire didn't have these graphics and looked like any other game, it's painfully average. Another open world collectathon to add to the sea of them. Its combat, story, side content, there's nothing about any of them that feels truly special that I would eagerly tell my friends they have to experience. Its presentation is the only thing that keeps Ghostwire Tokyo from being entirely forgettable. And that's such a pity, because when you think of all the elements of Japanese folklore and legends it pulls from, it has the potential to be so much more. And so, Ghostwire Tokyo will possess the number 44 spot, ahead of Deadpool. Not a good first showing for the PlayStation 5, but it'll get more chances going forward. For now, number 44 is as high as it goes. And that'll do it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider giving it a like. As some of you may recall, next month's video will be my 50th review here on the channel, so there'll be no spinning of the wheel this month. This time, I'm choosing the review. It took a little while, but I finally found a game, or in this case, games, that are very near and dear to my heart. Ones that I'm very passionate about, while also seeing their many failings. It'll be a big one, my friends, so I hope to see you all there. In the meantime, thank you all so much for watching. Take care, and may we see each other again when we turn to the next chapter in the Tome of Silver.